Meet Alex. Alex wants to start a business, so Alex does what any smart, motivated person would do. Starts learning. Alex reads 12 books on entrepreneurship, watches 200 hours of YouTube, takes 3 online courses, fills up 6 notebooks with highlights and summaries, and then nothing. No business, no product, no clients, just more learning. Here's the painful truth about Alex, and maybe about you too. Alex isn't lazy. Alex is addicted to learning instead of doing. And today, we're going to fix that. There's a feeling you get when you're learning. It feels productive. It feels responsible. It feels like you're preparing yourself for success. But there's a dangerous trap hiding inside that feeling. Psychologists call it pseudo work. Activity that looks like progress but produces no real-world result. You feel busy, you feel smart, but you haven't actually moved an inch closer to your goal. Think about it this way. If you want to learn how to swim, you can read every book ever written about swimming, you can study hydrodynamics, you can watch Olympic swimmers on YouTube for 100 hours, you can memorize every technique, the butterfly stroke, the flip turn, the breathing patterns, but the moment you jump into the pool for the first time, you're still going to struggle because swimming isn't stored in your head, it's stored in your muscles. It lives in your doing, not your knowing. And this is the first big idea I want you to lock in. Knowledge that isn't applied isn't really knowledge, it's just information. You've probably heard of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. It was discovered in 1906 by an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto, who noticed that 80% of Italy's land was owned by 20% of the population. He started looking for this pattern everywhere and found it over and over again. 80% of a company's revenue comes from 20% of its clients. 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. 80% of complaints come from 20% of customers. But here's the version that changed everything for me and that I want to apply to learning today. 80% of your real-world results will come from just 20% of the knowledge you need. Read that again. You don't need to know everything about a subject to get most of the results. You only need the essential 20%, the core principles, the foundational skills, the things that actually move the needle. The other 80% of knowledge, it's diminishing returns. It's academic. It's trivia. It sounds impressive at dinner parties, but it doesn't change your outcomes much. The problem is, most people spend 80% of their time chasing that final 20% of knowledge, the advanced stuff, the edge cases, the theoretical depth, while never actually using the foundational 20% they already have. Let's talk about what this actually costs you. Time is obvious. Hours spent consuming content or hours not spent building, creating, practicing, selling, connecting. But there's a less visible cost that's even more dangerous: decision paralysis. The more information you consume, the more options you see. The more options you see, the harder it becomes to choose. The harder it is to choose, the less you do. There's a concept in cytology called analysis paralysis. It's the state where too much information actively prevents action. You've absorbed so many different opinions, frameworks, and contradicting strategies that you don't know which one to follow. So you learn more, hoping clarity will come. But it doesn't, because clarity doesn't come from more information. Clarity comes from action and feedback. Here's a story that illustrates this perfectly. In 1519, the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés arrived on the shores of Mexico with 600 soldiers. They were outnumbered, they were in unfamiliar territory, and his men were scared. So what did Cortés do? He burned the ships. There was no more going back, no more what-if strategy, no more planning, only forward, only action. Now, I'm not telling you to be reckless, but I am telling you sometimes the most strategic thing you can do is remove the option to keep preparing and simply begin. All right, so how do you actually find your 20%? How do you figure out what knowledge is essential versus what's just noise? Here's a 3-step framework I call Learn, Apply, Loop. Before you learn anything, ask yourself, what specific result am I trying to achieve? Not, I want to learn marketing. That's too vague. Instead, I want to get my first 10 paying customers within 60 days. Now that you have a specific outcome, you can work backwards. What's the minimum knowledge required to reach that goal? What do you absolutely need to know, and what can wait? This one shift alone will cut your learning time in half. Give yourself a strict window to learn the basics. Depending on the skill, this might be 1 week. It might be 3 days. It might just be a single afternoon. The point is, you must have a hard stop. Author Tim Ferriss has a concept he calls minimum effective dose, the smallest amount of input that produces the desired output. Like medication, below the dose, it doesn't work. Above the dose, you get side effects. The sweet spot is in the middle. Apply that to learning. Find the minimum effective dose of knowledge, then act. This is the most important step and the one most people skip. Once you've done that initial sprint of focused learning and you've taken your first action, the real education begins. The feedback you get from actually doing the thing will teach you more than any course ever could. You'll discover which parts of your plan don't work in the real world. You'll find unexpected problems and unexpected shortcuts. You'll get specific, targeted questions that only come from actually being in the arena. Now, when you go back to learn, you learn with context, you learn with urgency, you learn efficiently because you know exactly what you need. This is the loop. Learn the 20%, act immediately, let reality teach you the next 20%. Repeat. Let's look at some real examples of this principle at work. Richard Branson dropped out of school at 16. He didn't have an MBA. He didn't take years of business courses. He started a student magazine, a scrappy, imperfect thing, and learned everything on the job. Today, he runs over 400 companies under the Virgin brand. Sara Blakely, founder of Spanx, had never worked in fashion or retail. She had zero formal training in product development. She simply had an idea, bought some pantyhose, cut the feet off, and sold the concept. She figured out the details as she went. Today, Spanx is worth over $1 billion. Neither of these people waited until they knew enough. They started with the 20% that mattered, a clear problem, a solution, and the courage to begin, and let the journey fill in the rest. The people who change industries are rarely the most studied people in the room. They're the ones who started acting while everyone else was still preparing. Here's the hardest part of everything I've told you today. Learning feels safe. Action feels exposed. When you're learning, you can't fail. You're just a student. Nobody judges a student for not having the answers yet. But the moment you act, you're vulnerable. Your work is out there. It might not work. People might notice. And that fear, the fear of being seen trying and failing, is what keeps most people in permanent preparation mode. But here's what I want you to remember. Failure from action gives you data. Years of learning gives you nothing but more questions. Thomas Edison didn't discover the light bulb by reading about electricity. He ran over 1,000 experiments. Each failure was a data point. Each data point moved him closer to the answer. You are not behind. You are not underprepared. You have enough to start. The 20% you already know, that's your launch pad. So let's go back to Alex. Alex has been studying business for 6 months. Has Alex wasted that time? Not entirely, but Alex is at a fork in the road right now. Path 1, open another course, read another book, and wait until it feels right. Path 2, take the 20% Alex already knows, pick one small action, and do it today. Here's my challenge for you, not Alex, you. Right now, after this video ends, I want you to write down one thing you've been learning about but haven't started yet, one goal that's been sitting in the research phase for weeks or months, and then write down the one single action you could take in the next 24 hours that would move you forward. Not the perfect action, not the fully informed action, just one real step. Because the 80-20 rule of knowledge isn't just a productivity hack, it's a philosophy. It says, done is better than perfect, started is better than planned, real is better than theoretical. The world doesn't reward the most prepared person in the room. It rewards the person who showed up and did the work. Stop learning to start. Start doing to learn.